Hello and welcome to F4 Milestones, the countdown, your podcast about motorsport. In this episode, we have one of the best GT racers in Spanish history, especially in this century, and his work goes beyond that racing. Welcome abroad, Andy Soucek. How are you?
Thank you, and thanks for pronouncing my name properly. Not everyone does.
There are many mistakes about that, okay? They say Andy Soucek, but it is Andy Soucek.
Soucek, that's right.
Because you come from Austrian father, if I'm not mistaken, and French mother.
Yeah, a bit of a mix. A bit international, but I was born in Madrid, and I've lived my whole life until a couple of years ago where I moved to the US in Spain. So I consider myself Spanish, but obviously I have Austrian roots, and my last name, actually it's Czech. It's not even Austrian, but it's a funny one to pronounce in Spain. I struggle to make reservations in restaurants.
Well, like motorsport, it is global, it is multicultural. How did you start in motorsport?
I guess like many people do in karting, but my start was actually not really starting with karts. I was telling you right before we started recording that I started with pocket bikes, the small mini bikes. And one day I just had a little incident which did hurt a little bit. The bike was a little broken, so we had to fix it, and there was no one that could help us on that track, so we went up to the karting track. And funny enough, my dad, who used to be an amateur but pretty accomplished racing driver, he met one of his fellow friends and also co-drivers or sort of rivals or enemies, but they were also friends for a long time, Juan Carlos Cabin, who had his son, Lolo, driving a go-kart. Mm-hmm. So I was very young, and probably I was like 8 or 9 years old. I was wearing my leather suit, and Juan Carlos told my dad if he was crazy to allow me to race in motorbikes, and instead he asked me to test the go-kart of his son. And it was in that moment that I realized that this is what I wanted.
And since then, you've not stopped.
And exactly. And after that, 25 years later, here we are, after a pretty long and I would say successful career in motorsports, racing in all types of categories.
You started, as always, in go-karting. After that, feeder series. You started then in Spanish Formula 3. How was that? It was the first years of the Spanish Formula 3.
It was awesome. I have the best memories of that time. Formula 3, as a car, it still is. It's probably the best single-seater. You have a lot of aero. It's true that the engine is not very powerful, but the reality is that it really prepares you for what's coming up next. So I remember my first test. I actually did a year before F3. I did Portugal in Formula Nobis, which was a tubular, type of Formula Ford, maybe a bit more robust, single-seater, and that was when I was only 15 years old. And then I did my first test with Racing Engineering, which was at the time the best team, and they won the championship that year in Albacete. And I did the test, and I just remember getting out of the car with a smile in my face because the aero and the grip level and everything was just so good. So I spent 4 years in Formula 3 until I won it. I finished fourth, I think a couple times. I won the championship the first year in junior because there was just a handful of drivers that were below the age of, I think it was 16 or 17, which at that time was almost, unrealistic to start that early in single-seaters. But then I had to fight very hard to win the championship, and I ended up doing it, which helped me to test with an F1 car for the first time.
There was quite a talent there.
Oh,
it was the first champion was Ander Vilariño a couple of years earlier than you, but you had after yourself in 2005. We have Roldan Rodriguez and Borja Garcia also. I think it was the year before you won. So a good, how do you say?
Breed of drivers.
Yes, a good bit of drivers for Spain. It was a golden era for Spain.
Yeah, you're right. It was the Spanish Formula 3, but at the time, many of us made it to, World Series by Renault and GP2. Álvaro Barba, José Manuel Pérez Aycart, Javier Villa, very accomplished drivers that ended up, going international and being successful in different series. So Ricardo Risati, Argentinian, I can name a lot of them, Roldan, of course, but it was a time where the older generation of the Marcel Costas and the Victor Ordóñez and the, Jorge Martínez and the Esteban Ocon, and the Esteban Ocon, and the Jorge Martínez 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 and the Este I don't know, a lot of drivers that I think Danny Martin was another one. They were very accomplished at that time, a lot older than us, so much more experience. But the younger generation was starting to beat them. So it was a bit of a generational change and a good time. So.
How was it in terms of economical issues or economical help? Because Fernando Alonso was world champion by that time. Spain had a good economic. It was not time for the crisis yet. How did you live this?
It was basically just family and friends at the beginning, and then myself with my manager, my dad, just walking around with a brochure in our hands. At the time, we didn't have obviously the iPads and the very nice technology that we have nowadays, but we had everything printed nicely. I think we did a pretty good job in selling sort of the career. And my dad was very advanced at the time. They created a company where you could invest in me. So you would literally own a percentage of Andy Soucek, so that if I made it to F1 or anywhere that I could make and earn some money, you would then get paid back. Which at the time, it's a bit like crowdfunding, but with a return. And it didn't exist. It was almost, news in the market. So like that, we started, getting a couple of thousand. It wasn't euros at the time; it was still pesetas. But if we convert to euros, we started picking, 5,000 here, 10,000 there. That's sort of how I started to become successful in karting. But then, when I went to single seaters, we had to go around and look for, bigger sponsors, and we were always able to get a couple here and there to afford and be sponsoring me.
And do you think that nowadays it is easier for drivers to find sponsorship, or it's a bit different now that people don't risk that much money?
It is. I think it's the same. Technology obviously grows, and you can have more exposure on social media. But the reality is, when it comes to finding the funds, it's still about meeting the right people at the right time, and convince them that you are the right product. Because it's also true that with so much social media, there are many other drivers that are able to showcase themselves. Whilst at the time, it was more about who do you know, and if you know the right people and you're able to get to the CEO of a company, marketing director of a company, and you have access to them, you already did the most difficult part, and then you had to convince them.
Exactly, convince. That's the key word. You had the results to convince them, but nowadays, which do you think it's more important, results or social media impact?
I think both go sort of aligned, but you're right. Back in the days, it was about the publicity that they could showcase in the car. I remember some sponsors that just wanted to print a picture of my Formula 3 with their logo, put it in their office, and when somebody came, they had that exposure. And when I was obviously Marca AS or any other newspaper at the time, they were big in their branding and logo. Nowadays, I think it's not about the sticker in the car anymore. It's more
because,
about.
You said it. If you won the race, you were published in a media outlet or even in TV. Nowadays, even though you don't win the race, you can appear on social media. If you have 2 million followers but you don't win the race, there are still 2 million followers on your account.
Yeah, but you need to get to 2 million followers too. Back then, yes, results were speaking for themselves, and when somebody sponsored you, you were on the outlet, and that was giving them sort of the return of the investment in marketing when they did the study and the numbers. To get to 2 million followers on any social media platform or all combined, doesn't matter. I think there is a lot of work behind. There is so many people that have, everybody almost has a phone nowadays, a smartphone. Everybody can do content. Everybody can log into a Instagram or TikTok account, but not everybody has 2 million followers. So if you're able to have that many followers, and on top of that, you're a decent driver, I think that's a great combination. You can at least have a relatively successful career, but at a certain point, it is about your talent and your teams and the career path that you're following to be able to really, really get the results that you should, to be able to make it to the top level. And that's not something that social media will buy.
In terms of sport, about racing, what did you learn in the feeder series in Spanish 3, GP2?
I learned especially that, most of the times you don't win, and you need to be able to keep up the work and the hard work. And obviously being strong mentally is not easy, especially when you're young. The frustration comes very easily, and to be able to manage the frustration, to be able to work within a team, to be able to work hard. As an example, when I was racing in GP2, the results, which is now the F2, the current F2, the results were not good. And I started with a team of David Price Racing. And David, who passed away a couple of years ago, great guy, very good friend of Eddie Jordan. He was in F1 for many years as well, worked as a mechanic, very knowledgeable. And David had a team that was not competitive at that time. And the first part of the season, I was really in the middle of the grid, if not further back. And I wasn't used to that. I was winning in F3, I was winning in World Series by Renault, I was racing against Vettel, Maldonado, Parente, the best drivers in the world. And I was able to beat them at times. So I went to GP2 and I wasn't winning. I said, what's going on? So I met with David. I said, David, the car is not competitive. And he said, well, why is it the car, not you? He said, I know that I'm driving well. So he brought up in another driver that was very successful, Olivier Plat, the year before, just to make sure that I was right. And turns out I was like a second quicker. Sorry, Olivier, for unveiling this. But at the time, we were in Monza, I was quicker. So David started to believe me. And then is when we changed the engineer. And then we brought in Andy Miller, who then became my engineer in Formula 2 as well. And then I started doing podiums since almost the second race that I started working with Andy, because the car was a lot more drivable. So how do you cope with a season where you're in the middle of the grid, you're struggling to score points, all the way to being on the podium and be a front runner? It's just about the mental, skills that you're able to sort of fight against all odds.
And do you think nowadays, with all this pressure about young talent coming faster and faster, Max Verstappen, for example, Kalle Rovanperä in WRC, and many more, nowadays Kimi Antonelli in Formula 1, 18 years old, do you think this pressure of winning, you must win, can affect young drivers?
For sure. There is more pressure to get in, to get to Formula 1 or whatever the category might be earlier. But there is a point where it is too early, and there is a bit of a fine edge there. I remember a conversation with Toto Wolff in Monaco a couple of years ago, where Kimi Antonelli was there. Obviously Kimi is relatively short, but at the time he was even younger, was 16 years old. And he was an upcoming talent that won almost everything he raced. And I remember speaking to Toto, and Toto, in front of Kimi, said to him, step by step, we're not gonna rush. You need to get ready for you to be in, sitting in this car. And a couple of years later, here he is. So I believe that Toto has put him in the car when he realized that he was ready. Some people are ready by the age of 18, some others might be ready at the age of 20, but it is, or maybe 22, but it is true that nowadays it is almost like a must to come in early and be very young to start, and you're 25, 26 and you seem almost old, which is crazy.
That's why feeder series are born, to make drivers learn and to know that, okay, you can be fast with 15, 16 years old, but you have to learn a lot, and you don't have to get to Formula 1 that easy, because it's a monster that can bite you, and with immediate effect, because the pressure, especially the media pressure, is so high, especially in GP2. First years of in this case of the championship, after it changed it from Formula 3000, how was it? How media were attracted to it?
It was tough. It was tough, but at the same time, it was the year that Hamilton won the championship, or the year after, because he won it in 2006. And I actually tested his car in 2006 at the end in the winter testing. So imagine for a driver like myself, started in Torrejón de Ardoz or in Boadilla del Monte, in a very small go-kart track, to be able to test with Lewis Hamilton's car in 2006 in GP2. So for me, that was already a dream come true, let alone thinking about Formula One. I remember GP2 at the time was like the feeder series like it is now, but for everybody that jump in an F2, it was almost like I made it, I made it to this already, which was huge, and F2 was even televised in Spanish TV. I remember, I think at the time it was Telecinco that was doing the races with Lobato. So imagine the guy who's interviewing the world champion Fernando Alonso in 2005 is interviewing me as well during my races, and we're in the same paddock.
You had podiums then, and you had also media impact. So your results were at the level of stepping up to Formula One. So the attention was attracted, right?
It was kind of, but in GP2, although I was sometimes, shining, I don't think, those 2 years were hard for me. They showed me a lot of resilience and hard work, because I wasn't enjoying myself as much. It was awesome to be racing there, a lot of exposure, traveling with F1 to every race. But the reality is that I was really not having a good time, just because I wasn't able to win races. I didn't have probably the right ingredients at the time. I don't want to blame the car or the team. It didn't work out. And that's when I transitioned to F2, which was a newborn F2 with Jonathan Palmer, who relaunched the old, very known Formula 2 championship. And it was a single make championship, same as the GP2. But the difference was it was a draw. So at the beginning of the year, you pulled the paper basically out, and that was your chassis number, your engine number. And then engineers were rotating for every race. So you always had a different engineer. And then the only thing you had was the same mechanic.
How can affect this? Because most people say that maybe motorsport is a individual sport, but it is not. It is a team sport. If you have your engineer going up and down the paddock, well, it does not give you any consistency.
Yeah, but it is the same for everybody, and that's what you want. No, you want to race in a championship where the car is not what dictates the result, and that's what I felt in GP2 at the time. Is that if you were not racing with iSport or ART GP, ART from Frédéric Vasseur, you didn't have a chance really to win. Mm-hmm. So it was very much team related. Was in the new F2, because it was a draw, it was the same for everybody. If the car was not good, because some cars are not born the same way, there was a test driver called Stephen Kane, and he was testing your car, and he could prove that the car was good or not, and then they would change it. So it was equal for everybody, and that's, I think, was the purpose of the championship. So at the time, it was a great idea, and I, not only because I won it, but because I really thought that changing engineer was giving you a very different vision. You need to adapt to a new person almost every weekend that you're racing, and you need to extract the most out of it and be able to communicate the best way so that you can set up the car the right way.
That year, 2009, was a difficult year in Formula 2, especially the first year that the series was reborn, and we have a pretty significant incident with Henry Surtees. What comes to your mind about that?
I guess I get goosebumps. It was Brands Hatch. I actually won the race, and when I finished, people, I could see the faces. I obviously saw there was a red flag. There was a car stuck in the wall. But at the time, when you're racing, you're not thinking about any, tragical accident whatsoever, The day before, he was on the podium with me. So I remember everybody told me not to celebrate because the injuries were severe. Nobody spoke about his death yet because it was early stages, but we found out that day. It was probably one of the hardest days of my life, just because you realize he was 18 years old. His father was, MotoGP world champion and Formula One world champion in the most dangerous time and era of those two championships. And he was there witnessing his son, just horrible to witness, and obviously, it makes you consider a lot of things.
You took the championship that year, first try, first championship. What doors did it open for you?
So at that time, I was F3 champion. I finished fourth in World Series by Renault. I did 2 years in GP2 with some podiums, and then I won the FIA Formula 2 championship. After F3, I tested the Toyota F1, which was the V10 engine with the roof tires, amazing car to drive. And that year when I won F2, I was entitled, or the prize, let's say, was to test the Williams. So I already had a pretty accomplished career at the time. You're right. I was, talking to several F1 teams. I tested the Williams in Jerez. It was a rookie day, and Jules Bianchi was there with the Ferrari. Daniel Ricciardo was there with the Red Bull. Brendan Hartley, Hinchcliffe, Gary Paffett.
That's quite a list.
It was a good crowd, and it was, at the time they were doing the rookie days so that younger drivers or drivers who didn't have any prior experience in a GP could test an F1 car. And I was the fastest driver that day. Paul Di Resta was there as well. And I was like 2.5 tenths quicker than second. So when I did the test with the Williams, it was a pretty good car that year. They were qualifying fifth, fourth. I think they did a couple of podiums. It was a pretty competitive car. But the fact that I was the fastest is when I started to feel that was my chance to make it to F1.
And how do you cope with the chance of not being allowed into Formula One? Okay, you were a reserve driver for Virgin in 2010, if I'm not mistaken, because in 2011 it was Marussia already. How do you cope with that? You are reserve, but you cannot drive.
Again, frustration. You go to every Grand Prix, and you're there just waiting. And now that I see a lot of friends or fellow competitors as reserve drivers in F1, I have conversations with them and they tell me the same. It's very hard to be there just witnessing how other people, drivers that you've raced against, are actually racing. You're just watching. There was a lot of input on the simulator. So I did a lot of sim to try and develop the car, but we had very low budgets and we had very limited resources.
And nowadays there's even less testing, so that's a difference. You grew up in a motorsport world where testing was allowed, and nowadays it is not allowed. What do you what piece of advice can you give to young drivers? Racing, and in this case, sim racing.
I was going to say, nowadays, you're right. Testing is more limited and almost cost prohibitive. It's very expensive to go out and test. But luckily, we have other tools. And a simulator is a very good tool to, at least get to know the racetracks, get to see and get a feel for the bumps. They're very realistic. They provide a lot of feedback on the steering wheel. I prefer the ones that don't move, the stable platforms rather than moving rigs. But it gives you a very good understanding of almost everything, even setup. You can really set up the car and work on that. So, if you can test, you can work on the sim, you can test physically to be the best version of yourself from a physical standpoint. That's all you can do, and then it's up to your talent and the team that you're racing and how you collaborate with that team to be able to succeed.
You're working in the US now. There's a completely different ecosystem based on that, and they race almost every month, every week there is a race, even circuits or dirt track. Do you think that it can be, in this case, applied to Europe? We have the Spanish Winter Championship. What do you think about racing in winter?
I think it's great. That's something that I see more and more at our track and in COTA. Like, teams are willing to do preseason testing in the winter, and I guess there is more and more series that are looking at doing a race series that is happening in the winter. The problem in many states is that the weather in the winter is very severe. So the good thing about Spain is that there is pretty good weather all around the year, and that allows you to do winter series without every day being a rain day. But I think this is the right way to prepare for a championship. If you're able to test in the late stage of the season, once you've finished your racing season, say in October, you have November, December, January, 3 months where you don't want to be sitting at home without touching a car. So it is important to do winter series to be able to keep up with your rhythm.
And there's the instinct about racing. If you sleep for 3 months, in this aspect, in this instinct, it goes to sleep as well. If you keep racing, you know how to drive, you know how to brake late and everything, and then you become faster. No, and after feeder series and getting closer to Formula One, you you take a step aside. You go to GT racing. How was the decision made, and why?
Yeah, I mean, I raced in Super League Formula as well. I did a test in DTM with Mercedes, and then I didn't see a future in Formula One because, as you said, I was a reserve driver, but I didn't get to drive the car. When I did the test with Williams, Toto Wolff had shares of the team, and he brought in Valtteri Bottas. So, it was a bit of a political decision, but obviously Valtteri is a very accomplished.
Well, that's Formula One indeed.
For sure, and Valtteri is a very accomplished driver. So at that time, it was probably the right decision. When you look at Valtteri's career in F1 past that point, so I said, where do I go to make a living out of it? Because I've been racing for many years and I have never made a single dollar or euro. A lot of people think that as a professional racing driver, you start making money early stages, but I was rather spending it. You know what I mean? It was a massive effort from the family and the sponsors. So at that time, I said, where are the manufacturers? And I saw that Blancpain, the Stéphane Rattel Championship SRO, was sort of looking good. They had McLaren, they had Aston Martin, they had BMW, Mercedes, Audi, a lot of manufacturers that were actually there. And I saw a lot of my colleagues, like Alvaro Parente, who was a factory driver for McLaren.
Yes.
I said, maybe I can become a factory driver for one of these brands. So let's switch and give it a try. It
was the secondary path to become, or to make a living, as you said, about racing, right? How comes Bentley to your mind, or how it came across you?
So the first 2 years I did race with ART, with again Frédéric Vasseur's team in Blancpain, with very good results. I had very good teammates. I had Kevin Estre as a teammate in year 2. Kevin Corges, the first year was a French guy, and who else was my teammate? Oh, two French guys actually. Leclerc, it's not the same Leclerc, and Mike Parisi. But anyway, good teammates, good results, 2 good years with McLaren. And the second year, Fred told me, and this is something I haven't really told to any outlet or media, he told me, if you want to continue, my sponsors stopped paying. And it was so that year I was still paying to race, or I was bringing sort of sponsorships. And he stopped paying, and there was a remaining balance of, I don't know, 20,000 euros or something. And Fred obviously told me, hey, we have a contract. If you're not fulfilling it, sorry, but you're not going to be driving. And I said, no, you're totally right, and I totally agree with you. And at that point, all my savings that I've been doing by working as an instructor for different manufacturers and agencies and whatnot, it was 20,000 euros. That's what I had in my account. And I remember I was in Marbella at my grandmother's house, and I asked her, I said, do you think I should do this? And she said, well, it's a big risk, but this is what you love. So I called Fred and I said, Fred, let's do a deal. If I do the transfer from my account and I do a good result in the last 2 races, would you fight for a factory drive for me with McLaren? And he said, yes. And so I did the transfer, did the last 2 races, did great. And then he told me, I'm going to get you a drive. And then Ron Dennis stepped back. It was Martin Whitmarsh at the time. And then Ron came back. And Ron didn't want to sort of sign any of the agreements that were already in place. So Fred called me and said, everything that changed. I had in planned changed. But, and that's why Fred is, hats off to a guy that I respect a lot. And obviously now he's the big boss at Ferrari, which I'm very proud of. He said to me, you know what, Andy, I had a deal with you, and I will not be able to make you a factory driver at McLaren, but I will pay you to race with me and for me. So I did that year with a salary for the first time in my life. So Fred is the first guy that paid me a check.
It was a relief
to race.
It was a relief for you. I mean, I'm not paying, I'm being paid.
Yeah, that's the game changer. And then I just met with Malcolm and the Wilsons, Matthew, and I just started as a Bentley factory driver, which was obviously a dream come true. And I spent 5 years racing for Bentley as a factory driver, which were an absolute dream and the most fun time.
There's several manufacturers, and there are the super luxurious ones: Ferrari, Bentley, Bugatti. And to drive for Bentley must be special because it's not that seen in motor racing, Bentley.
Yeah, it's a brand that has a lot of history in motorsports, despite the fact that it's seen as more of a sedan, comfortable luxury car. But the reality is, in the 1920s, the Bentley boys, Barnato and all the others were actually the ones that initiated Bentley
Yes.
as a racing team with those beautiful blowers, which I admire now when they go to Goodwood and other events. And there was a certain time between their success in Le Mans, because they won Le Mans in the 1920s all the way through the early 2000s, where it's true that Bentley didn't have any presence in motorsports. But then Brian Gush, who was my team boss, or he was the principal at Bentley at the time when I was racing in GTs, relaunched the project, and they won Le Mans in 2003 with a Speed 8, with a beautiful green Bentley sports car. So they went back to racing, and again, after winning Le Mans, there was another period of time where they didn't race. And back in 2012, they decided to launch the new GT3 Continental race car, and that's how it started. Yeah,
It was quite fast on the straights. I remember that.
it was fast on the straights, not the fastest. The Nissan was faster, but it's true that we had good BOP. But the first generation, the chassis was very good aerodynamics, so very good in the fast corners, but traction was not very good. It was a bit heavy. It was a bit lazy in the slow corners. So we had to have a better engine to be able to offset some of those issues. But it was a great car on longer stints with tire degradation. It was amazing how we didn't qualify too well, but then always recovered, and we ended up fighting for wins in most of the races. It was a great car for endurance. Not so easy for sprint races, although we won a couple. But then the generation 2, we didn't have the engine power anymore because they capped it with the BOP. But we had a very good car in terms of the chassis and the braking, and so we improved a lot on the mechanics and the whole structure of the car. Weight distribution was amazing. It was a great car. But then the engine wasn't as good. So the results were not really a lot better, to be honest.
But you fought for the championship in 2017, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
You were second.
Yeah.
It was very close in Barcelona, I remember that. But you really shown in different circuits all around the world. What's the best memory from that period?
Probably, there is a lot of races. If I need to give you like a quick sort of breakdown in my head of the years that we were racing with Bentley, is first of all, we finished second that year in the championship, but we were very close to win it in Barcelona,
very
my
close.
home race. We only had to finish ahead of the rival, the competitor we had, and all we had to do was just finish in the top 5, which was pretty doable. And the gearbox failed in that race, so we had to retire the car. But the memory is that we almost won Spa. We finished second, only 12 seconds behind Jules Gounon with the Audi.
After 24 hours, remember that? It's not a 1 hour race, it's a 24 hours of Spa.
11 seconds behind. And we could have won because we had a drive-through that, we could have obviously spared. But that's endurance. It's part of the business. So we almost won Spa 3 times where we had the pace, we're leading, everything was looking good, but we finished second, finished 4th another year. So, a lot of good memories in Spa, but that second position, I have to be honest, felt almost like a win. Then we won Misano Sprint, we won Paul Ricard, the 6 hours, which was a highlight as well. And we were fighting for the championship, which is the cool thing. We finished second, I think we finished third. So we were always right up there. We also finished second in the US Championship, in the GT World Challenge America. So great results with Bentley, and amazing memories. But it was, it was a fun time, and the team was great to work with. We went to Cumbria, which is where M Sport is based. every year to do, our trainings and our meetings with the engineers. And it was a time where it was my job. That was my job, full time, full dedication. I was cycling every day for 4 hours, going to the gym every day for 2 hours. It was just full focus on being the best driver. And that's why, that's how results come, is by dedicating a lot of time.
During that era of GT racing, you also had a lot of Spaniards racing: Dani Juncadella, Albert Costa, Lucas Ordóñez, Alex Riveras, even Antonio Garcia came from the United States. The Spanish Mafia, they called you. How was it?
I think that was sort of our idea, but yeah, it was amazing. It was a great time. I mean, imagine all my friends are racing with me, against me. Yes, we were competitors. Yes, we did fight on track, but outside of the track, we had a great relationship.
It was easier to cope with bad news or a bad day in the office with them. If you had a bad race, okay, let's have a drink, let's have a dinner.
I think I did that more with my teammates than I did, because in endurance you have 2 other teammates, so that's sort of your own team. But it's true that, we message each other. We had a WhatsApp group even where we did text often. But the fun thing is that we lived in Barcelona, most of us. Antonio didn't, but like Alex, Dani, Albert Costa, and myself, we live here. And at that time, we were training together, which is weird, that competitors are actually working out to prepare for the season. We're cycling, we're going to the gym. And it was a fun time, because then all the things we did here in Barcelona were then taken to the racetrack, and we had a lot of good times. So it was a good era.
It was quite different from the early years in feeder series, where you were quite alone, to say. You had a group in GT racing, and it helped you about changing. Giving advice or receiving advice?
Yeah, I'm a good team player. So from going to a fully individual team where everything is based around you, to be able to share the car with another 2 drivers and obviously change setups so that it fits everybody's feeling and needs. You need to be a team player. So I really adapted quickly to that, and I understood that if Kevin Estre or Max Sule or Vince, any of my teammates was quicker than me during that weekend, they should be the ones to do the qualifying, the third qualifying, or at the time when they had the different qualifying model, they should be the one to qualify. So you were always trying to look for the best result as a group rather than for yourself. So it teaches you a lot, because you're not always the quickest, you're not always the best. Most of the times you have other people that are able to beat you, and that's how you need to say, okay, I need to step down and I need to give credit to him in this case, because he's just doing a better job than me. So it's humbling.
About teammates, or in this case rivals also on track, we spoke a lot about guys, but girls. You had one, Maria de Villota. You raced against her, if I'm not mistaken, in Super League Formula. About football, in this case football or soccer for the US fans, and motor racing fusion. How do you think it went?
So first of all, with Maria, I think I raced in F3 and Formula Novis for sure in Portugal, because we had a good fight in Portugal in Estoril, where she pushed me against the wall. She was a very strong and aggressive driver on track, and she was a good friend of mine. So that day I remember I wasn't happy about what she did, but obviously then with time everything was cured. And then we did F3. I don't think we did Super League Formula together, but it is true that when I stepped down from Super League Formula, they wanted a driver, and I advised them to take Maria for the Atlético de Madrid team.
Yes.
And that's what she wrote in the book, which I appreciate a lot, because I did that connection because I wanted to help Maria. Not just because I was a friend, but because I also thought she was a good driver that could actually do a good job, and she did in Super League Formula.
That's a curiosity, to say the least. You're a reserve driver for Virgin, and the next year, again, or 2 years later, she was a reserve driver for the same team. In this case, Marussia, and then
which again, we had a conversation about that, and she called me and asked me about some advice to tell her about the team members and how I coped with everything within the team, because I obviously had the experience of spending there almost a year. But yeah, I mean, again, we were growing up in the same path, and we've been together many times, both on track but also off track. You were asking about Super League Formula and the soccer teams. It was a fun idea. Motorsports and soccer, probably two of the most watched sports in the world. It was a funny, interesting fusion. Not many people understood the fusion, to be honest, but at that time they were able to get a lot of soccer teams involved, very good and accomplished teams. And I have to say that championship was the most fun time I've had in motorsports, because we had the feeling that when we went to the race, it was just, we were going to have the best time. They organized great events around it. We were meeting with a lot of interesting people. It was a great idea, but it just didn't make sense, and it was difficult for people to understand, and that's why, it died after a couple of years.
Luckily for Spanish Sport Championship, we have a team which is in this case funded by Thibaut Courtois, the Real Madrid goalkeeper, and we're bringing together again these two sports. But going beyond sport, you have been working for the Circuit of the Americas in the last 3 years. How is it?
It's incredible. It's a lot of fun. I didn't stop racing. I didn't hang my helmet officially yet, but it's true that I'm almost 40 years old. I have 2 kids, and racing has been, my life for my whole, since I can remember. And to actually end up being the vice president of motorsports at Circuit of the Americas, it's something that I would never have thought of. It just came by coincidence. I met the owner of the track, and he needed someone to operate and manage the racetrack, and obviously with motorsports background. He offered me the opportunity, and as you said, 2.5, almost 3 years later, here I am, still working for COTA, and just still involved with the same people in the same environment that I enjoy so much. And honestly, my job just makes me enjoy almost as much as I did when I was racing, which a lot of people say, it's impossible, because the adrenaline that you have when you're racing a car is very different. But there is other types of adrenaline, other types of pressure, of strategy, of team, sort of playing the team in a different way.
So motor racing helped you a lot to get into not only this part of life. I mean, about stepping aside about racing. You manage everything that comes in sports. I mean, about Circuit of the Americas, MotoGP, Formula One, NASCAR, IndyCar, WEC.
We have those races, although I don't manage the majors. So we have 4 races that are considered major events in the US, because they have a major impact on the state of Texas. And those are, as you said, F1, MotoGP, NASCAR, and now WEC. The relationship with WEC, yes, I do manage. The other 3, it's not me, it's my executive team at the track. But all the other open to the public events, USAC, Moto America, SVRA, SRO, GT World Challenge, yes, those relationships I do.
Has the US motorsport market, change their view from being national only to get into NASCAR or get into IndyCar, to get around the world, to Formula One, to World Endurance Championship? Do you think that US drivers can go abroad easier than before?
I mean, definitely the US considers Europe the niche of motorsports, and I think they respect us a lot for what we have achieved here, and in particular, I think Spain, Italy, the UK are, sort of the 3 countries, France, that have the most, cultural background, and you just have to look at the teams and the drivers that are all spread around the world. There's a lot of Spanish speaking, Italian speaking, and English and French. But to your question, there is a lot of talent in the US. There is a lot of passion. There's more and more people involved. Like they start with sort of grassroots racing, and they then climb up to bigger and more important categories. IMSA, as a good example, the level there is absolutely insane. So if you go to a fully sort of mix of US with European championships, IMSA, which could be comparable, to WEC because of the type of cars that they have and everything, but being a US championship, the level is absolutely mind-blowing. But then you see other championships, like I said, Porsche Carrera Cup, or you go to Soucek or SRO GT World Challenge, and the level is awesome. So if you bring one of the drivers that is racing there to Europe, he would do an absolute great job. So yeah, for sure. I mean, we will see other American F1 drivers in the future, I'm sure.
Well, thank you very much for this interview, for the time you spent with us. Anything more to add, to give advice to young drivers or whatever?
Yeah, I think I'm nobody to give advice, but if I can sort of take the learning from my career is whether you make it or not to F1, if that's your dream, which I would encourage people to think differently, like you said, and think about WEC and IMSA and GT World Challenge and other series as a potential, future of their career. The most important thing is to enjoy every single minute, because it will come to a point like I am now where you're no longer part of that ecosystem in terms of being a racing driver. So if you're a racing driver and you have the opportunity to be racing, just enjoy every minute. You need to understand that every race that you're not able to win, or at least not do the result you expect, is another learning. And the fact that you can travel around, doesn't matter, Spain or Europe or the world, it will open your mind. It will give you a lot of experience. It will probably attach you to your family, which is also another point, that you can make it or not to have won. The chances are very slim and low, sorry. But something that nobody will take away from you is the learning and the fact that you've shared that time with the people that you love the most. So whatever you do, just take the positives. It's a great adventure. It shapes you, it forms you, it helps you to create you as a person in the future, and it gives you values. It shows you a lot of things, how to work within a team, how to know how to lose and to win, and how to share your knowledge with other drivers if you're doing endurance. So it opens your mind so much that for me, everybody that I meet that is a racing driver, I respect to start, because I know what they go through.
Well, as I said, thank you very much. Keep up the good work, because Circuit of the Americas is being even more global than ever, and thanks for your time. And for you all, thanks for being here for this podcast. We wait you, and we hope you enjoyed, and let's stay tuned for the next episodes in the following weeks. Thank you very much. Goodbye.